Hello and welcome back to AEF TV in association with Engerati. We're joined now by Felix from the Energy and Water Utilities Regulatory Authority, to give it its full name, from Tanzania. So firstly, welcome. Thank you for making the time to be in the studio.
Thank you.
And one of the narratives that's been coming through with a lot of people who've been sat in this chair, from financiers to IPP operators and so on, and they're saying that the key to getting the money flow, the deal flow, the power projects done, is to have a transparent and open and you know, well bedded in regulatory environment. From your experience as a regulator, because they're saying that when you get this, the projects will come, the money will come, the finance will come. From your experience as a regulator, would you say that that is a true assertion?
Let me be very straight in this. Yes, for attracting investments, especially if we are talking about investments from outside the country, it is true that a predictable and a transparent regulatory mechanism is very important. And that kind of regulatory transparency or regulatory measures have to be embedded in a legal framework, a law. So the answer is yes.
Following on from that answer then, can we dive in a little bit about what your experience was, and you know, the journey you had to take from in Tanzania, and all these journeys are different, so I accept that. But the journey that you had to take to get to the position where you know you had the regulatory framework, you had it embedded in law. You know, what are some of the lessons that other viewers who are in the same position can take from your experience?
Yes, in Tanzania, EWURA as a regulator was initiated or was established in 2006. What I can say is the experience in Tanzania is number one is commitment of the government to undertake the necessary restructuring or reforms in the power industry or energy industry in general. What we have done in Tanzania is after being established in 2006, we concentrated in the key principles of regulators' facilitation for investment. Number one issue is about predictability. For a regulator to be credible enough, the regulator has to be predictable. Investors and players in the industry need to know exactly what to expect in the business that they do. And for that to be done in EWURA or in Tanzania, what we have done is we have developed a set of rules for that predictability element. We have developed rules for initiation of procurement of power projects. We have developed rules for electricity generation. We have developed rules for electricity transmission, rules for electricity distribution and supply.
So you split up all the entire
segments,
value chains. Yeah.
The segments, in anticipation that the restructuring which is being pronounced in the Electricity Act of 2008 will take place. And actually now, as we are speaking, the strategy and roadmap for restructuring has been pronounced by the government. So predictability is about putting in place regulatory tools and instruments that will explain in detail what exactly to expect in terms of licensing, you know, tariff issues and the likes. We have also been able to develop tariff review mechanism or methodologies, which is very transparent. And in doing so, in developing all these regulatory tools, you have to be very much consultative. Consultation has to be detailed, consulting investors, consulting other stakeholders, players in the industry. So that is number one, stability. Number two, it's about cost reflectivity. The biggest cry of all investors in the world has been cost reflectivity of the off-taker, the power, the tariffs, electricity tariffs of the off-taker. What we have done is we have issued a multi-year multi-year tariffs for 3 years, which are based on cost of service study. It's not you know, an off-the-hand number. It has to be a study which is credible enough, and for that forms a basis for tariff determination. So we did that, and the first implementation.
On that point, there are a lot of people say, oh, well, it's very hard to have cost-reflective tariffs because, you know, we've got a whole swathe of different incomes, down to the end consumer. We've got people who can potentially afford that tariff. There are people who can potentially not afford that tariff, and so how do you deal with that?
Yes, issues of segments of the social status, they're important because affordability is one of the key elements to be captured by the regulators as you design a tariff. So that is captured in the tariff designs for different classes of customers. And that said, it means that does not exempt the cost reflectivity element. The issue is who is to pay what rate, depending on factors, social factors, but at the same time depending on what cost they impose in the system.
And if they go beyond reasonable use and things like that, is that one of the things that are put into the mechanics
Yes,
as well?
It is.
Yeah.
For example, just for illustration, we have lifeline tariffs in Tanzania where consumers up to 75 kilowatt hours per month have a subsidy. It is a cross subsidy within the domestic customer category,
Right.
but not between the cross subsidization between customer categories is not allowed in the law. So there is that mechanism, but that is number one. Number two element is subsidy goes mostly in connections. Connections in Tanzania for customers who are low income base, they have a subsidy of some kind, which is given by the government through a specialized fund, especially in rural areas, through the Rural Electrification Agency. I was talking about being predictable, but another thing is about cost reflectivity of tariffs. The other thing is how do you reduce the time taken by investors in negotiating deals with the utility? The procurement process, the negotiation process. What we have done in Tanzania, we have also prepared model power purchase agreements for different technologies, for gas, for oil, for coal, for wind, solar, all the technologies that we have and potential technologies. We have been able to develop model power purchase agreements. Why do we do that? We did that because it takes a lot of time in negotiating a project, and the longer time it takes, the more costly it is, and for investors, it increases the risk. So the transaction costs, the procurement process will now be shortened, and that is giving us another chance to contribute to the people making decisions for investors.
So what you're effectively saying is you've set up the core blueprint, and then the job is now to put the nuances around the edges for, so you aren't having to renegotiate the core every single time. And can you give us an illustration on what that has done in terms of speeding up the process? If you can say, like, well, look, 5, 6, 8 years ago, it was taking us 5 years. Now it's taking us, I don't know what the numbers are, but are you able to give some sort of illustration like that?
This is the model power purchase agreements, which I'm talking about. They have just been introduced.
Right, so it's a new thing.
But it's a new thing. But the experience we have is we started with smaller projects of less than 10 megawatts renewable energy. What we did is we prepared, we designed in consultation with the stakeholders a standard agreement, a standard power purchase agreement, and a standard tariff. What we have seen is within a short time, a span of about 5 years, we have seen more than 40 projects being approved for investments in remote areas, mini grids, where the national grid would have taken many years to go or to reach those kind of areas. So we see now the speed has increased, and it takes less than 6 months for someone to conclude a deal with the national utility because of the standard agreement and standard tariff. And it makes easy for investors to make a decision.
So, thank you for that sort of walkthrough of your experience. I think it'd be very useful for people who are watching, who may be getting and also that reaffirmation that if you get it right, it is true that the finance is out there and coming in.
Yes.
I mean, so as we're coming to the end of our time in the studio, I mean, is there anything else, any other sort of pieces of advice that you would like to give to countries who are trying to create the regulatory framework and so on, about the journey they should undertake?
Yes, so the most important thing is, number one is, as I said, to have a regulatory framework which is embedded in a law, a legal instrument. That is very important.
So you need to take away the politics. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. That insulates the regulators from any other interferences in making any decision or regulatory processes. That is very fundamental. That is number one. Number two is about the issue of how do you involve stakeholders in any decision that is going to be taken by the regulator, be it preparation of regulatory instruments, be it a decision on a tariff or license. Consultations are very important. Much as we are talking about independence of regulators, it is very important that you take on board the government and the politicians, especially the government, by briefing, giving prior information and giving the various options for any decision that you want to take, for the government to be aware of what the regulator is going. Otherwise, you are risking the regulatory capture. If you distance too far, you are risking the regulatory capture. If you go too close to the government, you are risking the regulatory capture. You have to see the balance. And for that to happen, the credibility in terms of professionalism and the integrity of the regulator matters a lot.
And that's where the enshrining everything in law kind of comes into it.
Yes.
Felix, we've come to the end of our time. Unfortunately, I've got many more questions, but perhaps we can explore those off air. Thank you once again for taking the time to be in the studio.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank you as well for watching. This has been another AEF TV session from AEF 2015. And thanks again for watching.